We begin today's wrestling news and rumors video with some sad news regarding Sasha Banks in WWE. And for many of Sasha Banks' fans, it will definitely come across as a bit of a tragedy booking-wise on WWE's part over on Friday Night Smackdown when it comes to Banks. As many of you are likely aware, when it comes to Charlotte Flair and the Smackdown Women's Championship, Sasha Banks is the next contender or challenger for Charlotte's title once we get past the upcoming Survivor Series 2021 pay-per-view event that will see the SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte Flair face off against the Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch. Now, while a lot of fans are under the belief that Charlotte Flair's not in the good books with Vince McMahon and WWE for her recent behavior and clearly not being an easy superstar to get along with when it comes to talent and management, with there even being speculation that Charlotte is trying to get out of her WWE contract to instead join AEW, according to one of our sources, Vince McMahon has no intentions of getting Charlotte Flair in any trouble behind the scenes in WWE or on television, with Vince reportedly not wanting to lose Charlotte Flair to AEW whatsoever, and will not be granting her release, or even booking Flair in a way that would cause Charlotte to want to leave WWE, because McMahon feels Charlotte is too valuable to WWE to lose to their competition, AEW. A lot of fans were sure that once we got past Survivor Series 2021, as a repercussion, WWE would have Charlotte Flair lose the SmackDown Women's title, in this case to Sasha Banks, but a new backstage rumor has revealed that sadly not going to be happening, and this is a tragedy when it comes to Sasha Banks' booking on SmackDown. While WWE are planning for Sasha Banks to be the challenger for Charlotte Flair's SmackDown Women's title to close out the year and likely continue through the Royal Rumble, as of right now there are no plans of Sasha Banks winning the championship from Charlotte Flair, despite Charlotte's backstage heat and bad behavior behind the scenes in WWE, with Vince reportedly planning for Charlotte Flair to retain the SmackDown Women's title against Sasha Banks in all of their upcoming title matches, as Vince apparently has no intentions of Sasha Banks being the champion anytime soon, despite a lot of fans wanting Sasha Banks to be the one to win the championship from Charlotte Flair. A lot of Sasha Banks' fans will likely be very angry with this news of WWE not planning to get Charlotte Flair in any trouble for her recent behavior and deciding to instead keep that championship on Flair, because many feel that Charlotte Flair deserves to lose the SmackDown Women's Championship with everything that's happened recently, and that having Sasha Banks lose this upcoming feud against Charlotte Flair is a terrible or even tragic booking decision on WWE's part, and that it shows Vince is not willing to put the top superstars in their place even if they deserve some repercussions, despite Vince having no trouble to discipline and even release and fire the wrestlers he does not care as much about. So clearly Charlotte Flair is not leaving WWE anytime soon, and the immediate future for Sasha Banks does not look to be very promising whatsoever, and it's unlikely that Sasha Banks is very happy with the plans in place when it comes to her upcoming title matches against Charlotte Flair, because Sasha Banks was among the women's division stars who felt that Charlotte needed to be put in her place for her recent unfavorable behavior. Now, as we had discussed recently, while 2021 has been a year full of non-stop releases and firings from WWE, it does not look as though we are completely over these releases yet this year, despite 18 stars being let go just the other week. As far as when the next batch of WWE firings happen, that still remains unclear, although one of our sources mentioned a few potential main roster superstars who could be next to be released in the coming months from WWE, and we will briefly go over each of them. Now, the first WWE superstar apparently at risk of getting future endeavored soon is none other than John Morrison. As some of you are likely aware, John Morrison has not been treated the best recently, with Morrison having to perform on Main Event lately despite all of his past accomplishments in wrestling, and it is clear that Vince McMahon does not really have any long-term plans for Morrison whatsoever. One of our sources has mentioned that Vince feels John Morrison is nothing more than a mid-card level talent that is disposable, so it shouldn't come as much of a shock or surprise if John Morrison is released from WWE in the near future. And if that is the case, there is no doubt the talented John Morrison will find success elsewhere, whether in AEW, Impact Wrestling, or pretty well anywhere else for that matter. Ricochet is another current main roster superstar that is not particularly in Vince McMahon's good books, and while we have been told that while Vince does feel Ricochet can add some value to the mid-card scene on SmackDown, it also would not be too much of a shock if Ricochet is suddenly let go from the WWE soon as well, for budget-cutting reasons. As well, Elias is another main roster superstar we have been told could soon be getting fired from WWE, with backstage officials not viewing Elias as anything more than a novelty mid-card act, who really does not have much of a major future with WWE. And considering Elias is making a fairly decent-sized salary with the company, a release in the near future for budget cuts is very possible for Elias. And finally, Asuka is also reportedly at risk of getting let go during the next wave of releases. And despite her accomplishments in WWE and always being near the top storylines in the women's division, Vince McMahon reportedly feels that Asuka is very injury-prone and quite old for a women's division talent at 40 years of age. And McMahon apparently feels like nothing much would be lost for WWE if Asuka were to be released in the near future. So that is another possible release that fans should potentially look out for in the near future. In all honesty, Asuka would be quite a big loss for WWE's women's division, because despite being on the older side for a female wrestler, Asuka still has so much left that she could do in WWE, and is still more than able to perform at a very high level. But given the fact that Vince was apparently never that fond of Asuka to begin with, her release would not be that shocking, especially at this point with all of the big releases from WWE this year. Now, the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns may sadly be in some serious trouble on Friday Night Smackdown in the coming weeks, and it's not entirely Roman's fault. And this big trouble for Roman Reigns is instead being brought on by Roman's manager and advocate Paul Heyman. As most of you are likely aware, on this past week's episode of Friday Night Smackdown, Roman Reigns faced off against King Woods, with King Woods winning the match via disqualification after the Usos interfered. And had the Usos not interfered in the match and pulled King Woods off of Reigns, then Woods was closing in on a clean win against the head of the table. While Roman Reigns celebrated after the match and put on King Woods' crown, Paul Heyman's comments earlier in the night may come to haunt Roman Reigns in a massive way. For those of you unaware, earlier on SmackDown, Paul Heyman stated that if his client Roman Reigns somehow lost to King Woods, he would either kneel before King Woods or be stripped of the Universal Championship. And while the argument could be made that Roman did in fact kneel after the match when he was crowned by the Usos, it was certainly not in front of King Woods, and Roman Reigns lost to Woods via disqualification. This fact is likely to be brought up on SmackDown this coming week, and while it is unknown exactly what will happen to Roman Reigns for going against what Paul Heyman proclaimed and stipulated, there is a good chance Roman Reigns will be forced to firstly return the crown to King Woods, and then put his Universal Championship on the line in a rematch, or even be stripped of the Universal title, which is what Paul Heyman said Reigns would do, although that scenario is a lot more unlikely.